Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Were many of you watching the LFC meeting today?
The hydrogen meeting.
Oh my God. We got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, Paul's going to give us a little update on that. He was there. If you watched it, you may have heard him testify. But first of all, we just want to say welcome. And if there are any new folks here tonight, maybe raise your hand if you'd like to, or just go ahead, go into the chat and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you are, and if you have any sort of organizational affiliation, go ahead and put that in there. In fact, anybody who would like to do that, please do. If you want to introduce yourself via chat, just let people know you're here. You're welcome to. So, the usual with Zoom, we're in a meeting format. So just please use the raise hand function if you would like to comment or you have a question. It's a little hard for us to track the chat and run the meeting. But if you see a question or a comment in the chat, of course, that you would like to answer or comment on, it's fine, dear. It'll say admit. Sorry, he's looking at we have a waiting room, so everybody's in so far that's here. Yeah, so use the chat, but if you have a question, please raise your hand, and then we can make sure that everybody here's your question, and hopefully we'll be able to answer it. And so please don't hesitate if you've heard anything new this week about legislation that's coming up, or you learned something, or if you have any questions, raise your hand and we'll let you speak. And as Paul mentioned, I don't know if everybody was here yet, but we're probably going to take the whole hour, and the Water Advocates Zoom that's starting at 6:30 is recorded. So anybody who's interested in that will still be able to maybe catch the last half and then watch the rest on the recording. So we're going to cover tonight. Paul's going to give us a little update about. What are you going to do?
I want to put the link to the.
Oh, okay. No, hold on. Yeah, everyone, there you go. Yeah, he's going to put the link to the water Zoom if you're interested in that and you haven't registered for that yet. It is in the chat now. Okay, so Paul's going to talk a little bit about the PRC appointments. If you read today's blog, or if you've been following the news, you know that one of those that was appointed has already resigned, and there's a new appointment, and we need to take some action on that. Then he's going to give you a brief report on what happened today at the Legislative Finance Committee's Hydrogen Hub update meeting. And then we'll talk about new bills that we've got information on, and some of the bills that were filed just in the last couple of days. Then we'll ask you to comment or questions if you want to share, and that's about it.
Yeah, and feel free to raise your hand in the middle of the discussion. We're also going to have Charlotte Parsons on, who I'm interviewing tomorrow for our radio show. She's a progressive advocate and has gotten involved in housing policy. And so we're going to talk, she's going to tell you a little bit about that. I'm not sure whether it's going to turn into a legislative bill in this session, but it's still interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's rock and roll.
Yep. Tell us about the PRC candidates, Paul.
Okay. Well, I've written about this several times now, and situation, I had a blog ready to go last night and was about to hit publish, and got an alert that the governor, one of her appointees, had resigned. Brian Moore. And
he was the grocery store guy who was a former legislator who had no experience.
He had graduated from high school, but never gone to college. So he didn't meet that requirement at all. And on many other levels, I mean, he just basically at his interview said, I'm the least qualified person you're going to interview. I don't even know anything about regulation. And then when he was appointed initially, expressed shock to the media, which is understandable given the way he handled everything in relation to this process. But I kept much of the analysis of Brian in the blog because I think it's important. It really illustrates, I mean, how does that committee that is charged with vetting those people, of the 3 people they appointed, 2 of them should be ineligible, including Moore, but also O'Connell, because O'Connell had 12 years as an exec at P&M and 8 at New Mexico Gas Company, and you're not supposed to have ties to the industries regulated by the PRC. And those are the two of the prime industries or organizations regulated by the PRC. And what's more, he actually testified in support of the Avangrid merger. And so, you know, that was, you know, it's just like he's dangerous. Moore was just like a dork.
So somebody's asking, do we know who was on the committee? Well, there was the selection committee, and then they put forward names. That was a slew of people, including Brian Egolf.
Who appointed himself.
Yeah, who appointed himself to that committee. And so they put forth, I don't know how many names, to about 6.
16.
To,
no,
no,
16 is what they came up with as being eligible, and they advanced,
I
think 6.
to the governor, and then she
I need to
chose
find that out.
3 out of those. So one of them now has resigned, but you know, that's a good thing. And so she, in his place, she appointed
A person who has a good deal of experience and is, you know, as I outlined in the blog, I encourage you to go and read the blog after this meeting, because it also has speaking points and contact information for all the people who'll be voting on this, the Senate.
right. The
And-
Senate rules will vote, and then it has to go to the full Senate. So these are not approved yet. I see, Bob, that you said is there wait, question went away. Is there a way to legally challenge? Not totally approved yet. So we're going to ask you to contact your senators and tell them
there's-
not to approve.
And they're speaking, I mean, it's really important to get this O'Connell guy off. You'll hear more about Avangrid later in this conversation because they factor in the hydrogen projects as well.
Right. Okay. So
Okay,
are
so
we,
let's-
do we have an ask on that? Just
Yes, there's speaking points in the blog, and rather than just repeating them here, it's basically just saying, you know, this guy has serious
Conflicts.
ties and conflicts, and you have better candidates. They did not pick Carolyn Glick, who had 16 years experience as a hearing examiner at the PRC. I mean, how do you not take her and take a grocer?
well, it's pretty clear that the governor chose people who she knew would approve the PNM Avangrid merger, among other things. And Carolyn Glick had already
I don't think
voted against it,
no,
hadn't
she
Oh,
wasn't on
okay.
the PRC at that time.
Oh, okay. All right. Angela has a question. Angela?
Yes, thank you. It's not so much a question as a comment. We have a contact with the San Juan Citizens Alliance, Mike Eisenfeld, and
Mhm.
we wrote him this morning to ask him about their perspective on the 3 candidates. And let me pull up my email. He said that he hopes that since Aguilera has federal regulatory experience, that he may be of value, and that and he noted that Ellison is obviously more qualified than Moore, who dropped out. But his comment was that they think Pat O'Connell is very good and would be very professional, and that he knows many of the Northwestern New Mexico issues. And he did comment that they still have no representation for Northwestern New Mexico. So that was the feedback that we had when we contacted him this morning.
Well,
Okay.
you know, it's interesting because when we wrote about this initially I commented that O'Connell had the most thoughtful comments in the questionnaire that they complete. I mean, he knows the stuff, there's no question about it. But he also testified that, you know, that P&M had done due diligence in examining whether to continue the Four Corners plant. And they hadn't done anything. They hadn't done any analysis whatsoever. So he basically just lied. And, you know, that's problematic.
Yeah, that's an issue for sure. I just wanted to share that and see,
Thank you.
because I don't have that much background in what's happened. I mean, in those particular people. So I just wanted to put that out there and see if there was more information.
Okay, well, thank you, Angela.
Okay, so you're asking people to read today's blog?
Yeah, read today's blog and
Retake Our
then
Democracy.
start writing to your senators now. I mean, it's really, I mean, we don't know. I don't know for sure that it's going to Senate rules. That's where nominees always go, but it is definitely going to the Senate floor.
I believe so. I mean, Milan Simonich wrote about it
Oh, okay.
today. It was either yesterday or today. And I think he said that it will go to rules, but it's usually just like a love fest and everybody's like, oh, there's no, you know, real vetting or questioning of these candidates. But then it goes to the full Senate. So it does require a vote in the full Senate. So you don't, I mean, if you want to write to rules, great, but you can also just write to your own senator because everybody will vote, right? Okay. Anybody have any questions about the PRC? If not, we will, can her choices be denied? Somebody's asking, the governor's choices.
Andy Payne has his hand. Oh, no, that's not his hand. That's your wood behind your head.
Oh. Can her choices be denied? Well, yeah, if the Senate Rules Committee, they could say, no, we don't accept this. Or if the full Senate votes them down, then they're not appointed and she has to go back to the list and appoint somebody else. So we'll see what happens. Okay, now we're going to do a brief update on the Legislative Finance Committee's Hydrogen Hub update meeting that happened today that they seem to be sort of keeping secret. And when I wrote to the committee secretary on Monday afternoon, then by Tuesday morning around 10 or so, the meeting was posted on the website. It hadn't been. And she said something like, well, it's not really a legislative finance committee, so we didn't post it. And it's something that didn't really make sense to me, but giving them the benefit of the doubt, maybe it was an oversight. Patty Lundstrom is the chair of that committee, so I'm sure she wasn't real happy that a lot of people came to make public comment. And Paul was there, and tell us what happened.
Well, I think we have our work cut out for us. Patty announced that there will be a piece of legislation, possibly to support hydrogen development in New Mexico. And one of it will be to secure matching funds for federal funds. So it'll be tens of millions, if not $100 million, probably.
Well, and they have been working on this full steam ahead, regardless of the fact that it was voted down in last year's legislature. I mean, they are part of a 4-state coalition. They've got all their department heads on board that have been working on this. So whether or not, you know, I mean, it's almost like doesn't really matter if the legislation passes. They'll get more money if they can pass legislation, but they're going ahead with it.
Well, that's the point of getting the money into the budget is not about that they actually need money to do this because they've got investors and everything else. The point is to look competitive in the grant process. There are 33 applicants still in the mix, and they're picking 8 to 12. And New Mexico is probably favored fairly highly in that 33. If you watch the huddle, I mean the meeting, they really have been doing their homework. It's amazing to me that these many smart people can do that much work and not encounter the fact that the carbon capture just can't work and has never worked anywhere. And that's that's the whole deal. If that doesn't work, the game's over. It's going to fail.
Mhm.
But I certainly drilled that home in my comments, and there were 2 or 3 committee members nodding their heads when I was talking. So we're going to have our work cut out for us. And we're going to have to be fairly delicate about the wording we use, because there's a world of hurt out there in Grant and Cibola County, and they're looking at this as their life raft. And
Yep.
so I think we need to be respectful of their needs, but this isn't the solution.
Well, and yeah, the meeting was recorded, and you can watch it at nmlegis.gov on webcasts. You just go and you click on the recordings if you want to. It was about 2 hours long, so it wasn't too bad. But the other thing, not to
It was also very interesting.
yeah,
I mean,
most of it was
really
pretty interesting, but the majority of, well, a lot of people were on the agenda, put on there by the committee to speak in favor of Hydrogen Hub and give updates. And then I'd say most of the public comment was in favor too, except for maybe 6 or 7
Right.
people who spoke against it.
They brought in people from rural counties, and they were ready to speak in support.
Yeah. One of the things I said to Paul after I was home doing other things and listening to it, I think what we need to do, our community as activists, is maybe really look at, is there a way that we could do totally clean, non-polluting hydrogen production in New Mexico without using millions of gallons of fresh water? And let's look at that, and let's, yeah, Rich, the meeting was open. Oh, no, it wasn't via Zoom. You had to be there in person. They said they didn't do Zoom. Anyway, I think we need to be open to the possibility that there could be green hydrogen. We learned about a potential project up at the old Cuesta mine that we were told by Dan Pritchard, who's,
Smart as a tack.
very smart and
And
knows about
was the
renewable energy. I don't think he's on here.
Co-founder of Renewable Taos. So
Right.
he's on our side.
He thinks it could be really good. They'll be using water that's gone into the mine, like millions of gallons of water that they have to pump out and filter and then put in the Red River. Instead, they would use it for hydrogen production. They wouldn't be using methane. They wouldn't have to do CO2 sequestration. So maybe, I don't know, there's it's the National
Renewable Energy
Labs. Yeah.
is the think tank behind it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, these people are smart as hell, and you're sitting there listening to it, and you're going like, okay, this sounds plausible. This sounds plausible. They sure seem to believe it. And then you go and you take a look at the 2-page research that we did with Renewable Taos, and it's like, no, the science out there says you can't do this. And it's just mind-boggling to me that none of these people have come across this and have bothered to try and counter it, or they just ignore it. And so I think that, it's going to take me a few days, but once we have good, solid speaking points, because we really want to be respectful of the people in rural New Mexico, and honor their needs. But this isn't going to work. And I think Roxanne's right that if we can investigate further this possible green hydrogen in Cuesta, which Jay Levine and Dan Pritchard both think has promise, well, at least we're not opposing everything, and maybe we'll get more credibility for that.
Right.
But and it also might bring in Jeremy Smith's comments from a couple of weeks ago,
Or last week. Yeah.
about possibly also just having ready at hand definitions for what clean means and all of that.
Right. I think the legislature still has a lot to learn, like all of us do. So, but we don't want them to pass a bill when they don't really understand the facts and the details. So I was going to say, somebody had said something about, the LFC meeting was only webcast. And of course you can't offer public comment via webcasts. At this point, we've been told that all of the House committee meetings, starting next week, will be available via Zoom. So you will be able to participate in House committee hearings and offer public comment.
Well,
Senate,
this seems to change every week.
well, they say in the Senate, they're leaving it up to Senate chairs. So we could just have, we don't know, a mix of some Senate committees that will be broadcast via Zoom, some won't. But it seems that most of these committees are willing to get written comment. So that's another way. If it's not available via Zoom and you can't come to Santa Fe to be at the hearing, you can submit written comment. We submitted the 2-page fact sheet about hydrogen production, and the committee secretary agreed
It was circulated.
to print it out and circulate it to everybody. And so that happened. So that was a good thing, especially for this committee.
But one of the things that Roxanne has been mentioning over and over again is the time to start talking to your legislators about bills is now, even if you don't know a bill number yet. You can still talk about, Health Security Act and needing funding and so forth to sustain their design process without knowing what the bill number will be. And then they'll connect the dots when something's introduced, or you can remind them about the conversation you had when the bill is introduced.
Right. And, in what I told Paul, we were texting during the hearing, and I said, unless we can really offer them a solid solution, not just say, oh, you should be doing solar and wind. I mean, there needs to be a plan. There needs to be a clear source of funding for these communities. But I don't know who can do that, who can help them. They're getting help with hydrogen because of the federal program. So I don't know where they're going to get help for the renewables, unless this thing in Cuesta really pans out. And we will give you more information on
So
that
there's a comment.
as we learn more. And Bob's got his hand up.
Okay. Bob, can I just address the comment in the chat first, and
Yeah.
then we'll go to you?
Sure.
Can you get back to it?
That's it from Elaine,
No.
from Merle.
Yeah. Oh, no, further up.
Okay. Toxic.
Yeah, toxic heavy metal mining wastewater would relieve mining companies of their cleanup responsibilities. Based on the Cuesta meeting that I participated in a week ago, or a couple of days ago, seems like a week ago, Chevron has been a decent citizen in that respect and has been remediating that site
At Cuesta.
at Cuesta. But certainly they are quite excited about the prospect of being able to put that water to use rather than just continually filtering it and dumping it into a river.
Well, and
So
to make some money on hydrogen.
It would
production.
probably help them make a little bit of money out of the remediation, but I think it's a good exchange.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions. Bob, you had your hand up first, and then Marty.
Thanks. Yeah, last week I went to a town hall with Senator Stefanik, and I asked her about Hydrogen Hub, and Matthew McQueen was there as well. And her comment was that it's already happening with this 4-state coalition, and she felt like it was important for us to define New Mexico standards for what clean means, kind of along the lines that you talked about, Jeremy's comment, I think. And that when she reached out to people to see if there's anybody, environmental groups in New Mexico doing that, she got kind of no response, like nobody's trying to come up with that. I read the federal standard, and their clean means 4 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every kilogram of hydrogen that you produce. That doesn't sound clean to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Maybe Carl has some more info. But anyway, I wondered if you've seen any efforts to kind of initiate a bill that would define some New Mexico standards in parallel with these other efforts, so that the stuff that does continue to go on, which clearly will, we can have some influence on that. Thanks.
Right, because if it's going to be pushed through, at least we need to be in there to make it the best bill it can be. Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Bob. Marty?
Yeah, you mentioned that there's federal money for the hydrogen. There's also a lot of federal money in the Infrastructure Act and in the CHIPS Act. for renewables in a lot of different ways, both for creating them, for transporting them, and so on. So what we really need is information out there about what it is and how to get it, which Public Power Working Group is kind of working on. There's not so much in inflation reduction, which is really mostly focused on heavy industry and reducing emissions from heavy industry, and also from the entire fleet that burns carbon fuels. So, but the other two have a lot of it. And I'm actually sort of in contact with Teresa's office in DC to try to understand what's out there.
As you gather that information, could you share it and maybe help us put together
Of
the
course.
kind of thing that Roxanne was talking about? Because that was one of the things that one of the commenters made a comment of, that there is all this money from the feds for renewable energy right now. And if we weren't devoting all our energy to hydrogen, could be focusing on that and getting funds for that.
Yeah,
That would not, but
there is, and what we're going to try to put together is, okay, you can read it in the bill, but other than that, what agency is it actually in? How do you apply for it?
Right.
You know, all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm working on.
Great.
thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Carl.
Just a side note that today Secretary Kenny defined 2 pounds of CO2 for every pound of hydrogen as being the definition of clean, and that's a federal definition that they passed out. So, you know, minor, but that's the way they're defining it right now. And the 4 pounds was what we defined last year as being clean in that debacle of a bill they were trying to get passed. So just a side note.
Yeah, well, we're gonna stay on top of this and keep digging in to figure things out, and we'll let you guys know. And if you hear anything new or you find a good source of information, let us know. Definitely, you know, you can always email us at retakeresponse@gmail.com. Okay, I think we're gonna move on to talk about new bills. Let me see if Charlotte Parsons is going to talk to us about housing, but I don't think she's on yet. No, because you know she's at work, but she's going to try to join us as soon as she gets home. Well, let me just go over. I went through the all the bills that have been pre-filed so far.
She didn't enter the room. She just entered their room. She's not in here yet.
She just walked in, so
Oh, okay.
give her a minute.
All right. Well, just let us know when she's ready. It's all right. We've still got time. One of the modernizing the legislature bills has been filed, and that is HJR2. It's a joint resolution. It's was introduced by Natalie Figueroa. It's called HJR2 legislative session changes, and what that one would do, and this will be put to a constitutional amendment, so voters will vote on it. It will lengthen the even numbered years, which are now 30 days. Those will become 60-day sessions, just like odd numbered years. And it will allow all bills of all subjects, not just revenue and budget bills, and not just what's deemed germane. So it'll be like a regular odd year session. And it will add a 5-day recess in the middle of each 60-day session. So every year they'll go for 30 days. They'll have a 5-day recess.
I think that 5-day
recuperate.
recess is great. Well, it also gives legislators who've had all kinds of misinformation thrown at them. It gives them the opportunity to go back and check with their colleagues, with constituents, and if they get staff, with their own staff. So we're thinking that's a pretty important piece of legislation. I'm going to have to take over for Roxanne because we got a phone call there. The constitutional right to reproductive health services is being introduced by Senator Linda Lopez and Representative Linda Serrato. And that would be also a joint resolution.
Constitutional amendment. It hasn't been introduced yet, so we don't have a a number, but we know that the two of them are planning to introduce will codify the right to abortion in the Constitution. There will be, it hasn't been introduced yet, but we know there'll be a paid family leave bill. And it's gonna give up to 12 weeks of paid leave per year for things like childbirth and some situations of domestic abuse. And employees would pay $5 for every $1,000 they make. And then the employer pays $4 for every $1,000 they pay out. But if
Sort of
you,
looks like Social Security there.
yeah, but if you're if you have fewer than 5 employees, you don't have to pay into that. And then as a worker, if you're a self-employed contractor, you don't have to pay into it either. But that bill hasn't dropped yet. We told you previously, and Charles Goodmacher was on the call. I don't know if he's here tonight, but Paul did a radio interview with him too about the Public Health and Climate Resiliency Bill. That has been filed. It's HB 42. So all of this information that I'm going over with you now is on our website at retakeourdemocracy.org. It's under NM legislation. It's all on that page. And you'll have, if the bill's been filed, you'll get a link to the bill. You can go and read it. And if we have fact sheets or talking points, which we do on a lot of these things, there's links to those too. So that's HB 42, Public Health and Climate Resiliency. We told you previously about strengthening law enforcement professions. And I just got a bill summary from Rachel Feldman, who's part of Indivisible SOS Santa Fe. That was that group was responsible for getting this bill written. It hasn't been filed yet, but you can get a summary of what's in that bill.
What I really like about the bill is it's not just a training bill. It started out as a training bill, and the training system for police definitely needs reform. And this would go further than just providing training. It would create standards of practice to which forces would be held accountable. And if they needed training because they were violating those standards, the training would be there and there'd be follow-up and so forth. So it's a good piece of legislation.
And
I
it
think.
makes it more uniform across all the law enforcement
Right.
services in the state.
As well as the people who answer the phone when you call 911.
Yeah.
They get training too.
So far, we know of 2 gun violence prevention bills. They haven't been filed yet, but one will raise the age to purchase semi-automatic rifles and assault weapons from 18 to 21. We sort of went, oh, but I think Miranda Viscoli, who's head of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, said, we've got to just take some steps because, you know, the gun lobby is so strong. This is just a small step. At least you have to be 21 to buy it instead of 18. And then the other bill that we know of so far is going to be introduced again. It hasn't passed in past sessions, but makes a gun owner liable if a minor gets the gun and shoots somebody, unless it's in self-defense. So yeah, Marty, you got your hand up.
Sorry. The law enforcement training thing also includes a requirement to report on violations, on bad behavior and so on. So for once, we would be able to have data on what's going on out there with law enforcement, because most departments do not report now.
Right.
Okay, good. Thank
And
you
I
for
was gonna-
adding that.
Thank you. I would add also to Roxanne's list on gun violence that Miranda also wants to establish a gun violence prevention office in the state so that there's a place to park multi-year funds to do training and so forth. And to launch programs at school sites and so forth.
Independent Redistricting Commission was filed. It's HJR1, so that's a House Joint Resolution by Natalie Figueroa. She's been busy. And that is exactly what it says. It would create a totally independent redistricting commission that doesn't have to be approved by the legislature. You'll find a link to that bill on the NM legislation page on our website. Christine Chandler, these are mostly House bills, but there's a few Senate bills, has introduced HB 25, minimum wage increase and indexing. Well, there's a couple of minimum wage increase bills out there, but this one is the better one so far. This will raise the minimum wage beginning next January 1st, 2024, to $16 an hour. It's 12 right now. So that's a good sized jump. And then every year thereafter, there would be an annual adjustment based on inflation and cost index. Rep Deborah Sariñana has introduced HB 32, which is an energy storage system tax credit. So it's an income tax credit if you, I think it's, yeah, if you purchase and install a residential energy storage system, you can take up to a $5,000 credit. If it's commercial or agricultural, it's up to $150,000 tax credit. So that's a good one.
So can we get 150,000 because we have a home garden?
Agriculture, yeah, for the vegetable garden. Then
That's a joke, folks.
few Senate bills here. Senator Bill Tallman has introduced the electric vehicle and electric vehicle charging unit income tax credit. So for the vehicle purchase, and there are restrictions on this, like you don't get the tax credit if you're spending, $80,000 on if you can afford to spend that much on a car, you don't need that tax credit. So there are some ceilings on the price of the car and some other things. For a charging station, it's $300 credit. Two other Senate bills. Now the Senate bills you won't find on the regular, if you go to find them, they haven't been numbered yet. What the Senate does during pre-filing, which is now until the legislation starts, there's a funny little link that's down in the Twitter feed on the homepage, and you click on that and it's a huge, almost illegible spreadsheet
Excel
of bills.
Spreadsheet.
And they won't be formally named and numbered until next week. But this one is another one from Bill Tallman. It's the Domestic Violence Victims Fund, and that will distribute a portion of the liquor excise tax to create a fund and fund the Domestic Violence Victims Fund. And these are again on our interim legislation page, and I've put in some links to the bills themselves. We'll get you more information on these, but for now, if you're interested, you can read the bill itself. And the last one is one that from Senator Antoinette Cedillo Lopez that she introduced last year and maybe the year before, I can't remember, but it's to prohibit life sentences for minors. So again, no name or number on that, but it's on the page. So does anybody have any comments or questions about those bills?
No questions? Oh
Wow,
my God.
we might finish her. Oh, are there any updates on local choice energy?
The local choice energy folks have been working very hard, and they've been meeting with legislators. If you have a legislator who would be interested in meeting with the coordinator of or the director of the campaign, Alicia is very articulate in describing the initiative and would be happy to meet with any legislator and has been doing so. And so that coalition is building support for this. And I think that we have a decent shot at getting it this year.
And is it Public Power New Mexico?
Public
is the
Power
website?
Public Power NM is the website. And they have a lot of information about local choice energy and other kinds of energy issues, energy democracy issues.
And I'm just going to try to address a couple of comments in the excuse me, in the chat. Rich has said that we need a federal law regarding independent districting commissions, and that not likely that will happen.
Well, Rich, we'll put you in charge of getting it through the Republican held House.
Then Michael has said, Michael Spurberg McQueen, why are the open government advocates not complaining about this new Senate practice? Are you talking about the fact that they're not Zooming the meetings, Michael?
No,
Um,
I'm talking about the fact that they are not numbering the bills. They're not on the website. They're in a separate document. And they're using proprietary document formats that are not good for accessibility. So it
right. Well,
drives
didn't, I
me
think
crazy.
they've done this for a while, haven't they? Didn't they do it that way last year too?
I think that was the
It was
first year.
new last time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
This
I
is the
don't
second,
know.
this is the second session.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why.
If
I
anybody
mean,
knows people in the open government community, please pull their elbow and say, you should look at this.
Right. You know who might, the League of Women Voters might be interested in that.
well, but they are accessible. It's just not that easy to find. So I guess,
Well, it's
They're-
not just that, the font is so small, no one could see.
well, you just
They're-
have to blow it up.
They're less easy, and for people who do not use screens,
Yeah,
people who use screen readers. So think visually handicapped people,
yeah,
those
it's
proprietary, the proprietary document formats they're using are
Okay.
less accessible to the disabled.
it's hard to understand why they're doing it that way too, because all the House bills are there, they're numbered, they're easy to find. You really got to dig for the Senate bills. So I don't know. We should ask Peter Wirth. We should ask our senator. Okay, hold on. I just let Charlotte in, so we'll ask you to speak in just a second, Charlotte. Let's just get through these last couple. Is that all? Yeah, I think that's all of our comments in chat. Oh, Marty's got her hand up. Go ahead, Marty.
Sorry, one more thing about, this is about local choice energy. Local choice, the Public Power Working Group is having a great deal of luck in getting endorsements, support of resolution to pass this bill from local communities. They just got two small cities in Grant County, and it looks like they may get, or they already have Grant County, other big counties. If you are somewhere in a smaller town or an outlying, especially county, and you think that your county commission or your city council would endorse, then I'll put Alicia's contact in the chat, and you could get in touch with her, because she we're looking for as much of this as we can get spread all around the state, and y'all are spread all around the state. So
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right,
Char-
now we're
Char-
gonna
Charlotte.
ask Charlotte to tell us about what she's doing around housing. And Charlotte, maybe just say a little bit about who you are.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm in the
Are
car.
you in the car?
so
Oh,
I am. I just finished showing houses. I have a lot of hats that I wear. So I'm Charlotte Parsons. I know a lot of you on the call, but I guess just a quick background is I'm just a progressive Democrat. I was one of the founders of the Adelante Progressive Caucus and was the chairwoman of the State Platform and Resolutions Committee for 4 years. In 2017, I started working in housing, and it was mostly just like, oh, I'm gonna get my real estate license and see where this goes kind of thing. And it went to just astounding places. 2021 was giant for the housing industry, and we saw typically we have somewhere around 7,000 to 8,000 units on the market at any point. During 2021, we were at like 600. So you can imagine what happened with the market.
and this is in Albuquerque, are you talking about, Charlotte?
Yes,
The
this is
Albuquerque
in
metro area?
Proportionally, the same thing happened in Santa Fe and honestly planet-wide.
But the numbers you're talking about are Albuquerque. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So
ahead.
I'll be doing the radio show tomorrow, and I'll have a lot more time to talk about this. But for now, I'll just say like crisis, crisis, crisis. So what I'm going to be, so right now I will say I contract, the city of Albuquerque is my client, and I'm a private sector liaison for them. They've been working on a housing forward project. And the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County have, for the first time ever, come together to ask for their housing budgets together. We'll be asking for $50 million. That $50 million will go toward a lot of the hotel motel conversions that I'll discuss tomorrow on the radio show. A lot of the retail conversions, like commercial conversions to residential. Obviously, a lot of people are working from home now. So we're looking for ways to create more density within the city rather than going out into what we call urban sprawl, or what we really know as like Santolina and developments outside of the city. Side note, it's so much higher of a carbon footprint to develop that land outside of the city than to just start using the space that we have. Yeah, so workforce training programs. There's a lot of money that needs to go into the procuring of different, developments and things like that. So $50 million will cover the city and the county. We're also asking for, they're creating a joint housing authority within the Bernalillo County and the city of Albuquerque. Now, I thought that the governor was going to be looking for a state housing authority and strengthening that, but I haven't heard her talk about that yet recently. So I'm really hoping that we see something like that come up from her office. And that's really exciting. So I'm also very, very newly, like today, about to sign a contract with SEED, the Sustainable Equitable Economic Democracy Organization, and they are working on affordable housing as well. So we'll have a lot of initiatives that kind of overlap with City of Albuquerque and that type of thing, but they're, statewide, and there's a lot of exciting things to look for coming up in terms of housing. I think like main keys that we need to go up to the legislature and remember is that we need to increase supply and we need to increase access to housing. So if you're looking at any kind of bills, if it's not increasing the supply, then we're not getting at the root cause. And we need to really hone in on that, because no matter what we do, we have to increase the supply. So I'm hoping that I'll have more, like I said, tomorrow, and I can, I promise Paul, I'll send you a blurb of things to look for to put on the blog, but lots of really great things coming through, and I appreciate you guys letting me come on the show tomorrow.
Yeah,
And she
one
keeps talking
question.
about coming on the show tomorrow. I need to clarify.
Right.
We're going to record tomorrow. The show is on Saturday.
But the
Got it.
Zoom recording will be on our website when? On Friday or Saturday?
Friday or Saturday. I don't usually like to eclipse the radio show.
Right. So right
but
after
I
the
do.
radio show.
I do it.
And Barbara Grothus is asking, Sharla, who will own these conversions, these hotel motel conversions? Will the city own them, or are they private, or is it a combination of?
Yeah, it's a combination.
Okay.
And so essentially what's happening, every city, every municipality really has their own zoning, ways of doing things. And ours uses the Integrated Development Ordinance, the IDO. So really what we're doing right now is we're working to remove the requirement for a full kitchen for those conversions, so that you can have, you don't have to have a range. Ideally, that would be great if we could do that statewide. Oops, sorry. There we go. So what the money in the $50 million will be is to buy some of those from the city. The way that they do that is they'll use the money to purchase the building, and then they put out an RFP, like a request for proposal or whatever. And that's for the developers, for the managers, for all of the people involved in the renovations because hotels are made for short term, right? Hotels are made to last a few years. The renovations that are needed would be to create long-term living, permanent housing. So for these particular ones, Barbara, we're talking about just the procurement, and then all of the work that goes out into it goes into private industry, or not for profits, usually is where they go.
Okay, thanks. And if you could hold on 1 second, we got a couple people with their hands up. I'm not sure if they're going to have a question for you or not. Rich, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Charlotte, for your update on that. I'm involved in a few other aspects of housing, and I wanted to report on that. I'm part of the Civil Legal Services Housing Group, and a group of us are from that are going to meet with Andrea Romero and Angelica Rubio on Friday, if it doesn't get canceled again. And it's, I think, largely concerning a bill that would help move towards, that's best I could say, really level the playing field for tenants versus landlords. But I think they may also be talking about some of these monetary requests and a couple of other issues. One of the things I wanted to say that when we learned the other day that that they finally got to talk with Joe Cervantes, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, who blocked this bill along with a bunch of other ones earlier this year. And he said he was open in the case of housing this year, but we'll have to see what that really means. If he's open, he damn well better hear the bill this time. But I'm not real. I was hoping for that they would come up with something better than that. But a couple of the other things that are happening is that the rental assistance from the feds are being phased out in the next 3 months. So this is going to be really hard on tenants who don't have the money to pay their rent, be relying on assistance. And
Yeah.
We're hoping, and it sounds like they're maybe Andrea and others are going to be asking for funding. The state has so much money, there should be funding for to replace the federal funding, or even more than replace the federal funding. But this rental assistance is going to be absolutely critical. So, oh, Charlotte, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I met with Andrea yesterday, and I guess unfortunately something happened in the courts like just yesterday. So essentially the bill that Andrea and Angelica are turning in is last year's bill with a few tweaks, but one of the major tweaks was going to be exactly what you're just talking about, which is adding in a more permanent system for the emergency rental assistance program, which I've been shouting off the rooftops. I agree. But apparently, I don't know the details, and I'm sure you'll find out more tomorrow. The courts have ruled it that they just don't like it for whatever reason. So what I'm hoping, I mean, with the infrastructure bill that came through, I'm hoping we see more federal money come in and that we can reinstate a program like that. But again, like, we would want to see a state housing authority for that to be organized, right? Because the real problem with we've had tenants use the emergency rental assistance program. I have a client right now trying to use it, and there's literally one person that works that program, one person that answers the phone for the entire state of New Mexico, and that's not okay. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Rich. It's absolutely critical. Everything else on Andrea's bill is the same as last year. So tenant rights, basically predatory lending in the world of housing.
And unfortunately not source of income discrimination, but we'll have to leave that for another date beyond Albuquerque and Bernalillo County. I also just wanted to add something really quick about taxes, that we're going to have to, there's no bills out there yet. There probably might not be for quite a while, but we're going to have to do two things. One, the usual, trying to increase taxes on the wealthy, which is going to be a real hard sell this year, harder than the past years. But we also have to especially resist the efforts to cut taxes for the wealthy that Patty Lindstrom and others are calling for. So it's going to be a double-barreled effort. It's going to be difficult.
So along those lines, Rich, one of the things, the messages I'm hoping we can develop is the idea, because the governor put in the budget a rebate. I didn't see how much the rebate was, but if a rebate, if it's just going out to everyone,
$750 per person, maybe.
It's not targeted.
No.
And instead of that, increasing the child family tax credit, low income family tax credit, that's targeting the
People
support.
who need it.
Or targeting tax credits or just giving money to people, whether it's poor people like GBI, guaranteed basic income. I had an exchange with Patricia today, and she's going to be introducing something in the session. And people
is that going to be up to the governor, or is she proposing legislation around that?
Legislation.
To do some pilot projects, I think, right? for guaranteed basic income. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some already happening in a few places in New Mexico, but
Yeah.
something larger than that.
Yes, but it seems like if you've got too much money, don't just give it to everybody, target the use of it and send it to
Right.
the people who need it the most and where there's going to be a bang for the buck. Because if you give that money to low income people, they spend it. And so they spend it and you get GRT and sales tax and everything else back.
Right.
Yeah, and I also, speaking from like, I work with industry a lot, which is, I am usually the black sheep in the room. I am the black progressive sheep in the room. And one of the things that they really want to see some of that, you know, refund money turned into is a break on some of the GRT for the folks. Like we have like a 20th of the folks that we need in the world of construction and things like that. So using it as an incentive to become to get into those trades. And I'm not a tax specialist, but I do see, like, in housing anyway, all cases except one, really the industry has been in just complete agreement with all of the things that all of the Democratic legislators are even doing. So it's just been such a ray of hope. But I do think one of their asks is that they get a break on that GRT for construction workers. So, you know, I tend to sort of want to hear more, and I don't know.
So just to offer you some sympathy, Charlotte, you know, you dive into some of these waters and all of a sudden you've got to be a tax expert, a hydrogen expert. You know, it's just like mind numbing. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have another hand up. Did you have anything else to say, Rich?
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. Cheryl's got her hand up.
We haven't seen Cheryl for a long time.
Mhm.
How are you, Cheryl?
Still can't see her.
I'm okay. It's a breath of fresh air to hear all this optimistic possibilities. And I don't know if I missed it when you were talking, Roxanne, or asked Charla. We have lots of housing choices and opportunities to make. And did you say anything about a state tax credit for renters? I know the federal government is going to be working hard on housing, at least on the Democratic side, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about state tax credit for renters. I mean, but you know, when you read the papers, I mean, the governor and some of the legislators are just saying, "Oh, we got all this money, let's give it to people." You know, it's just that they're giving it to people who don't need it. You know, like Paul said, it needs to be more targeted. Definitely.
I did see, what's his name? Someone was talking about, one of the unlikely senators has actually had a good idea for once about creating, like putting some of the money aside for a housing
Munoz.
fund.
Munoz.
Munoz, yeah.
Yeah.
That was an unlikely one. I liked
Yeah.
it though. I liked the idea.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't heard, Munoz's idea is to create buckets of things we should be investing in and pulling tons of money in each bucket to be expended over the next 2 or 3 years. You know, so as a way of using our surplus for the things we need rather than just either giving it back to the citizens or what, I don't know.
Right. I mean, yeah, saving some of it while we have it, I guess. So we just have a couple minutes left. Oops, it's 7 o'clock. So let's try to wrap up really quickly here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Charla. Appreciate that. So if you've been reading the alerts, we know that you know that we're asking you to contact your legislators now, this week, because we've been hearing from legislators that they're just too busy during the session. You know, they want you to tell them what your priorities are, what you're urging them to vote on now. So please make those phone calls and send those emails and let them know what you care about. And I also just want to say some of the lists, none of the lists have been updated at the legislative website yet. But that's all we have. And we just don't have the time to go and dig up. There are 16 or 17 new representatives. We're hoping that if you have one of those new representatives, you can just Google them and find their contact info, because for us to do it, it would multiply times 16 or 17. And as soon as those lists are updated, I've been checking every day, we will let you know.
But if there's anybody out there who has an hour or two to spend, just, oh, Cheryl's raising her hand. She has an hour or two.
Oh,
To,
Let
to-
me
to-
interrupt you a second.
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead, Cheryl.
Go to the Secretary of State website. When people apply to be a candidate, they've got to put in their real, honest, home, personal email and phone number. That's all there on the Secretary of State website.
And email too? You said email. I'm sorry.
Email
Yeah,
also.
email and phone number.
Now, this is all before they're elected, so it's good, solid personal info. Granted, we don't have their office phone numbers or their staff yet, but you can go get their personal info, like Cynthia Borrego for me in House District 17. Her personal email, phone number, address are all there.
Okay, that's good to know. That's a good tip.
Again, though, it'd be better if other folks were able to do that, because even
Right.
doing that.
No, I think
for
she's
us-
suggesting that,
Right.
that anyone could go
Okay.
and do that. Yeah, the lists, contact lists on the NM Legis website don't usually get updated till the end of the first week. So it could be another week or so before those are totally updated, because they also have office numbers on them. And then all the committee assignments need to be made, things like that. So Becca is saying, thanks, you're very welcome. But she's asking about any bills related to protections for LGBTQ community health and rights. I haven't seen
Yes,
anything.
one came in just today from Equality New Mexico. I don't know whether it's just
Oh,
an
okay.
email to me or whether it was something I read online but we'll get.
Yeah, we're keeping
information
our
on
eyes
that.
open. Okay. Oh, right. And then Barbara's mentioning that some of the, yeah, well, we don't really need their home addresses, that because of the shootings in Albuquerque that I'm sure you've all heard about or read about. Some of those home addresses are no longer available, but that's okay. All we use are phone numbers and emails. And then when we find out what their office number is in the Roundhouse, you might want to go visit them. So we'll let you know about that. So I think it's 7:04, so we should probably wrap it up for tonight. And thank you so much. We haven't yet posted registration links for upcoming meetings, but it looks like we're pretty much gonna try to meet every Wednesday, 6 to 7.
Until we run out of gas.
Because we usually don't, run out of things to say. And once the legislature starts, there's so much going on. It's really good to check in, and we really appreciate hearing from all of you. Even if it's just a question, it helps us think about something that maybe we need to do that we haven't done yet. So yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good night, and I hope we'll see you next week, and the session will have started. Woohoo.
Yeah, we'll be on the road. All right, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks much.
Good night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.